Here's a great first from the 1950s. The McDonald's. In the Soviets and the United, you know what names did? They out themselves fallout shelters. We were communists from home, we and the balloon Cuba. Far from home, we were with war. The war in Korea was stalemated. We elected Dwight who ended. And this original United at the 90. Christmas Place in the 1950s. They constructed a special building so the armistice could be signed. Because of some changes in the demilitarized zone, it is over there now on the North Korean side. The New Times reporter here then said it was more like signing a declaration of war. Women.
These Panman forces to the purpose of the beginning of the end of in Korea.
General William Harrison signed for the United Nations.
There were a lot of commies on the other end. They were all dressed up in their best uniforms. But I didn't believe in bowing and scraping to communists. So I waited in my old suntans and didn't make any ceremony out of it at all. Wasn't going to do.
Down there in the south, 40,000 Americans still on duty, lest there ever be another invasion from the communist north. Korea was the first war that America had failed to win. It didn't lose either. And the reason the fighting stopped here was because of a threat from President Eisenhower. Shortly before his death, in several very candid conversations with friends and historians, the president reflected on many of the actions he'd taken while he was in the White House. And one of the things he did was to tell the North Koreans and the Chinese, if the fighting stopped here, he would widen the war and he'd use atomic weapons.
Either this armistice had to be signed for dilly-dallying, or I was no longer going to be bound by the so-called gentlemen's agreements, and I was going to use whatever was necessary to win.
The threat. It was also the last time an American president would explicitly threaten to use atomic weapons. In 1953, atomic weapons were not unthinkable.
Eisenhower said to me, and I was deeply shocked, he said, "You British look upon the atomic weapon as something totally new. But you've got to remember, throughout history, new weapons have conventional weapons. The atomic bomb will soon become a conventional weapon." I must say my jaw dropped.
Washington's cavalier attitude would soon change. When the Soviets stepped up from the atomic to the hydrogen bomb, we began to realize that using these weapons might mean the other side using them too.
Probably was sort of two factors. It took fairly early, in a few months of instincts. I get as a result of military experience of liking to have analyses and potential problems or areas that require.
President's advisors with missions, including overthrow in each World War what we to us for the next decade. The United States should take feasible political, economic, propaganda, and covert measures designed to create and exploit troublesome problems for the USSR. While the United States was battling for a draw in Korea, we were already becoming involved in Vietnam. One of America's World War II allies was on the verge of a disastrous defeat in a place called French Indochina. The French were fighting to hold on to their colonial empire. They were being beaten by Ho Chi Minh. The French were frustrated and decided to go for a quick victory. They chose a plane in North French Hill.
Casualties are heavy on both sides at Dien Bien Phu.
Americans know a few years later what battlefield obstacles the Vietnamese could overcome. The general hundreds of miles away because of heavy artillery. They surrounded the garrison. The siege lasted for months. The United States had been paying for 80% of the French war effort, but Eisenhower refused French pleas to save the garrison. He would not use American soldiers to perpetuate French colonialism. As glorified in this North Vietnamese film, Dien Bien Phu fell on May the 7th, 1954.
Tôi nghĩ rằng là cái chiến thắng Điện Biên Phủ là một cái chiến
Dien Bien Phu was a forging ground and also a place to gain experience on modern warfare, so that later on we could expand this to win victory in the fight against the American imperialists.
The French troops were marched and French colonial domination in the region came to an end. The events of China were a paradox. Eisenhower would not support an Allies' colonial adventures, but communism in the region had to be checked, if not, after the fall to come. Following a recorded news conference in 1954, it became known as the domino theory.
You have a row of dominoes set up, and you knock over the first one, and what will happen to the last one is certainly that it'll go over very quickly.
Most of the dominoes